Okay. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. This is a jam-packed hour, so we will keep it tight. I am actually going to let David Barr intro us. So David, take it away.
Okay, I'm seeing the number go up. Maddie, I'm just going to wait 1 second.
Okay, sounds good.
Continues to climb.
Yeah, it's weird in Google. It's like either you let everyone in automatically or you have to do it manually one by one.
Understand.
I guess doesn't bode well for me saying I like Google Meets, but
Okay. I was just looking for some stability in the number. Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar hosted by Catalyst and GlassHouse. Appreciate your involvement here and your participation today. At Catalyst, we seek to bring unique solutions, both strategic and marketing, to our clients. But we find oftentimes we need to step back and say, are we really fixing the problem that's the problem? And in a way in which doing that is, are we asking the right question? And in that regard, we thought this discussion of the great ROI reset would be very pertinent to many of the people that we speak to on a daily basis. Likewise, our co-host, GlassHouse, brings unique solutions in today's digital world to its clients, and Jimmy Speyer, the CEO, will be speaking a little later today. Before we begin, though, I did want to extend a huge thank you to two very dear friends and two of the smartest people in franchising. That's Catherine Monson and Mary Kennedy Thompson for being on today and sharing their insights. One of the beauties of franchising is the collaborative spirit in which we all share, learn from each other. And so thank you, Catherine and Mary, for participating today as we look to answer this question of, is the current model of franchising still working? And how should we think about the great ROI reset? With that, I'll turn it over to my business partner at Catalyst, Madeleine Zook.
Thanks, David. So I want to start with the question. I'm going to end with the question. But the first question is, what if this whole time we've been solving the wrong problem? And what I mean by that is a couple fold. But before we get started, I also wanted to layer on to what David said was, the speaker panel here has 110 years of combined franchise experience, 150-ish brands and led or advised over the last 5 years. We've got 4 multi-unit franchise owners, so everyone except Catherine. I did ask Catherine to buy one in the last 30 minutes because it made the slide sound better, but she's responsible, so she did not. We've got 4 CEOs, 3 past IFA chairs, and 1 new technology, born from a franchisee. So I really encourage you to stay on the whole time, take notes, and I will do my best to also keep this entertaining. We don't do boring webinars at Catalyst. So over the last 5 years, or I guess all time, we've always said, how do we generate more leads? Well, we're starting to realize, what if that's not the question we should be asking? What if instead we're saying, is our business model built for today's economy? And there are very many brands that we talked to today where it sounds like the new ramp franchisees aren't quite making it. The existing franchisees aren't getting the ROI that they used to. And for a lot of franchise brands, you're operating in a silo. And so that's why we're hosting this today, to kind of bring to light, is it just you? Is it the economy? Or is this the business model? And what do we do to solve for that? And with that, I'm going to pass it back to David to walk us through a couple of his signal versus noise slides.
Thank you. As many of you maybe have heard me speak about before, I think especially in emerging franchisors, it's very easy to get distracted from what is the true mission and what are we trying to accomplish. And I boil that down to really a discussion of what's the signal versus what the noise. Noise is when you get just ongoing phone calls from, let's say, franchisees who are losing money, candidly, but present other problems to you. I had that just recently. I had, as chairman of an emerging brand, someone called me and started complaining about our teams, the chat room, how emails were working. And I knew deep down there was a bigger problem. And I stopped and I said, Francine, can we just have a discussion of what really is bothering you? What's really bothering you is you're losing money. And let's all talk about that as our signal. All this other stuff is noise. I share that experience because even after some 40 years in franchising, I too could get distracted with noise. But I think you have to really focus on what's the signal. And so today's message is about how do we, both in the marketing side of the business and your strategic side of the business, look towards what's the signal. Maddie, can you change the page? And I just would define it as the signal is that what keeps us clearly on track. It's crystal clear, it provides clarity. What that requires of management teams and ownerships of emerging brands is, what is your purpose? What's your goals? And what are your limited resources pointed to? And anytime you come off of that, then oftentimes that is noise. Many of you run EOS or run other type systems. It's all in a way created to distinguish between signal and noise and keeping people on track. I find that incredibly difficult at times in franchising, more so than other businesses, because you have so many different disparate inputs. But I would encourage that if you can stay on your signal, ultimately you'll achieve your goal.
And some of the things that we talk about with noise are maybe some of these things, and you've probably heard some of them before. Consumers aren't buying, our agency is underperforming, franchisees are converting poorly, we don't have an app, it's inflation. Like, how do we separate what from here is signal versus noise? And I know a lot of you are texting me right now going, I've said that before. So, but what if none of these are really the problem? Is franchising becoming harder, or are we trying to win today's economy with yesterday's assumptions? And I pulled this metric from a bunch of different brands and obviously some other sources, and just to show you that even over the last 5.5 years, most of what affects franchising in small businesses, competition, digital media costs, hourly wage, prime lending, have increased at a pretty significant rate. So if every major input required to build a profitable franchise business has increased, but what's the one that hasn't? Is it expectations? Have you updated the FDD? Have you updated the item 7? Have you looked at, is it realistic to get the same cost per lead and work the same model? That's the question we want to answer today. Back to you, David.
And so with that, we'll start with the quote that I hear back to me the most often, which is, franchising is the licensing of a business model that produces predictable cash flows to an average franchisee with average intelligence, with average work ethic on an average day. It sounds so simple, but too often, again, the noise takes us away from it. Our job as franchisors is ultimately to create a distribution set that becomes incredibly predictable. This is an indication of that. Too often, that graph on the right is what I'm presented with emerging brands. And they say, hey, my system, if I could only have good franchisees, would be always to the right and everybody would be great. But that's not where they're at. So I present this as a way of saying, first, understand your reality, and then your signal should ultimately be right in the middle here of impacting this average performer, and how do we move the whole curve from left to right such that all franchisees are succeeding. And I have found there's a few slides that I want to share with you that helps you really get focused on that. One, on emerging brands in particular. it's critical that you're looking at every unit's ramp of monthly sales, EBITDA, or any other KPI. And then what I typically do is cohort those. You could do it by year, you could do it by region or whatever. And what you want to do is have the line that we were showing of each new cohort exceeding the prior cohort. This is another indication of this. This comes straight out of one of my businesses where we cohort the EBITDA for each year and year of performance. So in this case, you can see there's 2020 stores, how they performed in 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24. And what we want to see is this ongoing left to right, such as you see here in the far right cohorting, which is the total, that every year we're in fact improving store level EBITDA percentage. That's our job as franchisors. Now, as we then take that as our overall job, we have to say, how does that relate to marketing? And how are the best ways to do that? And I say that because there's only really two ways to move your EBITDA percentage, right? You can grow sales and therefore leverage your P&L, or you can cut costs. Too often, I find that franchisors, emerging franchisors, are focused on the cost segment. And I'm not saying it's not important. Please don't repeat it that David didn't say it's important. I'm telling you that if you want to truly move the whole distribution curve, you will find that you will move it faster if you have a better insight into your marketing strategy and how you're going to be pursuing that. This graph shows how do we look at same-store sales growth. In this case, I'm showing different cohorts and how they drive to ultimately an average unit volume. So this histogram down below that's crazy, I'm not suggesting you should focus there, but we're growing the AUV, which is that very top line, or our average unit volume, because by doing so, ultimately we improve profitability. And on the next slide, we're able to show that if you take sales and EBITDA and do a regression analysis or a correlation, just think of it as a correlation, if you plotted, oftentimes this is what you see in almost every emerging brand. As sales grow, right, the EBITDA or cash flows of the franchisees grow. And we will have things outside the curve, oftentimes related to costs. And those could be labor costs, those could be marketing costs, those could be other things. But what I want you to do is step back and say, what is our goal as a franchisor? Is to make the average franchisee predictably profitable. That's it. And if your curves, that initial distribution curve I showed, is too flat, that means you don't have predictable. If you plot your franchisees on a curve like this, and they don't look at a line like this, instead it's just disparate dots everywhere, I would argue again, it's not predictable. So you have to get to a place of predictability within your system. That's what we're selling as a franchise. And with that, a focus towards profitability. On the next slide, I just mentioned that I think ultimately we have to think about how do franchisees, our ultimate customer, think about the business. And I tend to believe they look at it as what's the internal rate of return. An internal rate of return talks about predictability, it talks about what are the cash flows and the like. And so today, as we talk about strategy and we talk about marketing and some of the items that GlassHouse will bring forward as well, what we're looking to do is ultimately assist you in your journey of providing those predictable cash flows to franchisees.
Thank you, David. I don't know anybody else who could do all of that in 10 minutes, so we're crushing it on time. So the next question is, well, if I'm looking at this and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if we're predictably profitable, or my growth curve doesn't really look like a bell, have the economics of franchise growth changed permanently? And I say franchise growth, and I really mean your brand growth. What should evolve? Are we allowed to revisit startup capital and ramp timelines? This is all things that we're going to start asking Catherine and Mary coming up. So very first, please welcome Catherine Monson, who is the CEO of Propelled Brands. Currently, they have Fast Signs, Camp Bow Wow, and My Salon Suites. Catherine, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Maddie. Glad to be here.
So, Catherine, I got to ask you, and you also just announced a new model for Camp Bow Wow. So I thought this was a perfect lead off. Are franchisors allowed to rethink their model as years go on? Because for the most part, we're supposed to just be a model that works and we're supposed to never change it. I think that's the assumption.
Well, that is a great question. And I am probably the oldest person on this call. And I have been in franchising on the franchisor side for 46 years. So I started in franchising before there was email. No, seriously, don't laugh, Maddie. Before there were websites, before there was pay-per-click advertising. And so I say that, go ahead and laugh, Bree, great. I say that because what is always happening in business, whether it's the last 5 years or the last 45 years, is environments change, right? Technology changes, competition changes, the economy changes, customer expectations change with all of that. And so only great franchisors are thinking, I've got to constantly be looking at my model. I've got to constantly think about ways to improve it. So I have now been with Fast Signs for 17 and a half years. We have repositioned the brand 5 times in 17 years. Why? Because competition changed, technology changed, and customer expectations changed. And so our job as a franchisor, besides providing great support to the franchisees, great marketing, great training, all of that, is to be constantly scanning the marketplace, competition, technological changes, the economy, and thinking through how do we make sure that we're constantly evolving the model, not revolutionizing the model, but evolving the model, because there are always going to be those changes. Now, it is easiest to do that if you're in a situation like I've been the last couple of years, to buy some brands and add them to my portfolio, because I come with a fresh set of eyes. But it's been just as important for the 17 years that I've been with Fast Signs to also have that outward looking fresh set of eyes. So we have to think of value engineering the cost of the box, not as a project of a one-time thing with an acquisition, but we've value engineered the Fast Signs box 6 or 7 times. In fact, it's sometimes, wow, there's this new piece of equipment that is highly more productive, and that's actually going to improve the franchisee's ROI. So we're always looking at that, at least annually, if not more frequently. And so we got to be looking at everything. And sometimes the biggest technological changes don't come from inside, in this case, the sign industry, but technology at large that we have to think about. So when Maddie laughs that there was not email when I started in franchising in 1980, we used to send everything by US Postal Service, right? And so we had to evolve the business models at that time. So just that's kind of like a broad statement. We had better be rethinking everything from startup capital and marketing and budget and staffing and technology and profitability timelines. We ought to be focused. The most important thing is franchisee profitability. We can never be in a position where it doesn't break our hearts if a franchisee is not successful. Franchisee profitability, in my opinion, is the holy grail.
Thank you, Catherine. And man, what I would kill to be a CMO in 1980, because direct mail must have crushed and there was a lot less options. I'm just saying.
I tell you, it was fun. We had some amazing dimensional direct mail, just fabulous stuff.
And going a little bit off script, which I know you hate, but for someone who is just wowed by what you have just said, what are the first thing you look at, or what is some metrics? Are you just looking at revenue year over year to decide, oh, maybe we should start looking at changing the model? What are some key points that come up that might scream, hey, it's time to go look inward?
Well, you can never look at just one KPI. You got to have several. But again, I'm going to say the foundational is franchisee profitability. And that's why it's so important to be getting that profitability and cash flow input about your franchisees to really know what's going on. But I mean, we ought to be looking at every single metric that's important to that business. Now, the B2B metrics for a Fast Signs are different than the B2C metrics for a Camp Bow Wow. But you need to really understand how that business works, how they develop and maintain new customers, what their cost structures are, and all of the things to help leverage a franchisee's profitability.
I love that. And on that, we're going to move right over to her bestie and also CEO, Mary Thompson of BNI, who was formerly spent many, many years with Neighborly. Mary, thank you for joining us today. You're on mute. It's your fault this time, not mine.
There we go. I'm not muted now. Thanks so much, Maddie and Catherine. I always love listening to what you have to say. I've spent years learning from Catherine and watching the ththings that she does. Same with David.
One of my favorite things is whenever you are at an IFA event, and usually they've got the IFA or past chairs at a table in the front, no matter if it's Mary or Catherine or David or Sam presenting, they're always taking pictures of each other's slides. So you know that they're constantly learning, and I absolutely love that.
That is true.
So Mary, on this, and you see, so many different types of businesses. Right now, which assumption is costing franchisors the most money? Are we just measuring marketing? Is it business health as a whole? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it goes back to the question that David kind of started with and you asked, which is franchising getting harder? Mm-hmm. And the answer is yes, and the answer is no. And, business business is getting harder, which then sometimes makes franchising harder. But the reason I say yes and no is because when you think about where the world is going, if those people have the right tools and they're using the right tools that are available to them at the right time, business is getting better and easier. They have the wrong tools and they're not evolving, and sometimes having some revolution as well, then it's different. I think about when electricity came into the world. Manufacturers said, we're not going to retrofit our manufacturing. It costs too much to put electricity in. We can have the oil lamps work just fine. We're not going to do it. But some smart business person said, I'm going to build a manufacturer space that has electricity. And then all of a sudden they were moving faster and better. And the person that was using the oil lamps said, business is getting harder. Well, it is getting harder because you're not using the tools that are in front of you. And so when you tie that back to your question about, is it the business health of the marketing, I don't see them separate. I really believe that business is marketing and marketing is business. And marketing is not just, whether you're sending out a mailer or doing something on digital. Marketing is every touch point that the customer has an experience with you. Just like with our franchise owners, if I want to have good validators, I better have every single touch point with those franchise owners be good. So they say, you know what, they mean what they say what they mean, they care about my unit level economics, they care that I'm profitable, they give me the great resources and tools to help me be the best I can be in the marketplace. So I think we need to rethink how we're looking at business, and AI is a great example of that. What we're trying to do is still use oil lamps, or we're saying, okay, I've got this one little light bulb over here, but the light bulb's not connected to anything and it's not really doing what it needs to do. This is a place in time where I think most businesses need to look at their business from the ground up and build it around the use of those tools instead of just plugging in little pieces, parts. I would bet there's not one person on this entire session that it hasn't dabbled in some kind of AI. My question to you is, are you building your company around the tool that can help you grow your company the best?
Catherine, what were your thoughts when they were creating the oil lamps? Just question. just kidding. I'm going to die later. I'm going to die.
Payback is something.
Catherine, anything to add on Mary's comments?
No, I mean, that is exactly right. I agree with everything Mary says. In fact, with every conversation I ever have with Mary, I actually wrote down a few words to add to my thought process. So complete alignment.
I love that. And now we're going to move on to Jimmy. Jimmy is the CEO of GlassHouse and also was a franchisee. And this is actually how GlassHouse came about. And I'll let him give a little intro on that. But when I was trying to create the intro slide, it was like Catherine, David, Mary, gajillion dollars. And then there's Jimmy. But what I also want to add about Jimmy is that he's generated over 60 million in recurring revenue and did about $1 billion in exits on the technology side. So Jimmy, thank you for joining. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you, Maddie. I appreciate it. Yes, I have been a franchisee. I'm the founder and CEO here at GlassHouse. We're a technology platform for home services specifically. We work with franchises that represent tens of thousands of locations. We have about 350 brands we work with. And we do digital door knocking software. And this is not a commercial for my software, but I work with a lot of franchises. I've been at this for 3 years at my company. I have 15 years in software experience building revenue teams. We sold a ton of software, just like a ton. And so my whole passion is about building teams and selling stuff. I love selling things. I love solving problems. I love building teams that help people solve problems. And one of the things that when me and Maddie were spitballing about doing this, that I was really keen on talking about is, as a franchisee, I work with Zors and Zs. So I can actually live in the middle. I see mom and dad fighting a lot. And so I see both sides of this as a pretty independent third party who has also been a Z, right? So I've lived in the shoes of at least one of those organizations. And I'm like, okay, well, if things are changing, why and what's going on and how is that manifesting in that relationship? We talk to a ton of franchise business coaches. So people we work with a lot, actually, they help their Zs be successful. You all have them in your systems. And I ask them every time, like, what do they call about? And they call themselves therapists. And they have to call, and these people are always upset. I'm like, well, what are they upset about? At the end of the day, they're probably upset that they're losing money, right? That was, I think, what David said earlier. It's like, I'm calling this, I'm losing money. Nobody bought these systems to lose money. The plan was to make money. That's why they invested in these assets. And so if the unit economics are changing and we're not recognizing that fact, how does that manifest itself in the day-to-day experience of the Zor? My wife actually operated our franchise for 2 years, and it was really, really hard. And the experience we had unlocked, and these conversations I've had with thousands of franchises have unlocked, what I hope is some learnings. And I have one really big recommendation I want to make to every franchise system as a Z, but also as a technology partner and a vendor. So if you want to take us forward here, Betty, one slide.
Well, your other slides are next. This is just
perfect.
Your intro here. So as you sit today,
yes,
do you think, from your experience as a franchisee, mind you, you joined an emerging brand and emerging platform of brands. Yep. Do you think that franchise system was built around today's economics or yesterday's, or just not at all, off of FSO dreams, no offense, and hopes and unicorns?
I assume that everybody is going into all of these things with the very best of intentions, and they don't know what they don't know. And so individual platforms or brands, this is not about, I wouldn't call anybody specifically out in that regard. And my experience is my own. But what I would say is I see across the system that there are people who are recognizing and realizing the reality of changing unit economics, creating predictability. And then I see brands where they simply are not. They are just, I'll show you with some data here. They're not making adjustments, to Catherine and Mary's point. They're not recognizing the changing kind of like sea or the tide here. And that's causing people pain down inside of their system because people are signing up for what is not ultimately the reality of their experience because the math isn't mathing for them. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, I'm doing all the things. I am doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm not seeing the results. And they just want to be successful. They're not maliciously buying franchises, right? So in any home services or any vertical for that matter. So I mean, my experience has been like, it's just not universally true that the franchisors have accepted these changes. And they're, in some cases, it's hiding in plain sight.
I love that. Now, Catherine, back to you. And it's just in addition.
Hold on, I gotta go get my oil lamp. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Paul Revere is knocking. So in addition to what you mentioned before, what should we be willing to challenge? Because oftentimes if, David and I are working with a brand or they come to us and we say, hey, your marketing spend is too low or your royalty model is too high. It's like, how? That is the sacred cow. Don't touch that. Don't talk about it. What should we be willing to challenge and change?
Well, I have to be careful about being absolutist and saying we have to be willing to change anything, everything. Because I will tell you that as a franchisor CEO, I'm not inclined to change royalty. But then as I think about it, that's not completely true, because when I came to Fast Signs in 2009, what I heard from our highest volume franchisees, and there were some significant disparities in that mix or that graph of sales volumes, is they said, I'm 6 times the sales volume of the average franchisee, but I don't take 6 times the manpower to support. And that was very true. So one of the things I put into place after getting a board approval from the private equity firm that owned Fast Signs at the time is something called a sliding scale royalty rebate, where the franchisees keep paying me 6%, keep paying Fast Signs International every month of the year, but at higher and higher sales volumes at the end of the year, we rebate something back. And there's some really smart rules around that. If any of you want to take a look at the Fast Signs FDD, do that. Take a look at our sliding scale royalty rebate, because it was written with a lot of intentionality. We're allowed to increase the sales bands by CPI every single year. You have to be in good standing to get your rebates. You've got to be current and all that stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff about it. But what I'm doing is what I did was reward our highest volume franchisees with a rebate at the end of the year. So I think we have to be really willing to look at everything. And I'll tell you that we've acquired and have 2 brands today where if you compare their national ad fund percentage against the competition, they're below. We know we have to get on parity with our competitors if we're going to have appropriate impact in the marketplace. At the same time, we are sensitive as a smart franchisor to the feelings and income statements of the franchisees. And so rather than just go, boom, we're going from 1% to 2%, we're going right now, we're working through what's the right timing. We probably need to fix other things in the model first. We need to help with franchisee profitability. As an example, with an increased focus on franchisee profitability, we increased owner's discretionary profit 2 full percentage points in 2025 for Camp Bow Wow. If we can get another 2 full percentage points increase in franchisee profitability for Camp Bow Wow in 2026, then it's an easier conversation to say, now to continue this kind of growth, we need to think about moving the ad fund from a 1% to a 2%. We have that right in the contract, but since the very beginning, it's been collected at 1%. So we have to think about all those things. We have to think about, are we using the right marketing mix, right? So I really think we ought to be willing to change everything. I will tell you another story. When I came to Fast Signs in 2009, there were no essentially outside salespeople in the Fast Signs franchise locations proactively calling on prospects and converting them to customers. To me, in a B2B situation where you're getting the vast majority of your sales revenue in a trade area that's 2 or 3 mile radius around you, one of the best ways to convert prospects to customers, yes, we could talk about warm leads and all that kind of stuff, is personal outside sales, walking into their place of business, getting to know them. Now, adding a salesperson absolutely increases some costs, but we were able to show them math that how salespeople sell higher margin products and services. And if you get a salesperson, here's the kind of flow through that you're going to get, dramatically changing the results for our Fast Signs franchisees. So we ought to look at every part of the model. As an example, the cost of labor, as everybody knows, has gone up significantly in every single industry and every single position. So labor optimization is a really important thing, particularly for Camp Bow Wow. It is a higher labor model than our other 2 brands. And we have been spending a lot of time on labor optimization. and are in process of developing an AI labor optimization tool to help our franchisees be even quicker to optimize labor. And so those are the things, we're looking at everything.
Now, I might be calling you out, Mary, but do I recall that you don't like the sliding scale of royalties?
That's not my favorite. My theory is that royalties represent our portion of the customer's money for being able to represent and use the brand. There are probably brands where it makes sense. I've been part of brands that had sliding scales. I know why and what. My philosophy is that you pay the royalties for the right to use the brand and the systems and all parts thereof. And I also think, like when Catherine says, everything you have to look at.
I like that. And as Dave and I just had to assist with a 20-year brand rolling out in a B2B, a NAF that they never had. I wish that we had consulted with Catherine first and looked at maybe how do we make this a little bit less of a heartache for franchisees. Well, it's always going to be a heartache, but not everything has to be a now or never. So I do like that piece.
I can see map funds where you might have something, because it's a little bit different when you're talking about marketing. That I've seen that, and I've also seen caps. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah. And on that, Mary, so then what will win in the next decade? We're changing things. We're challenging the norm. So is it the biggest budgets, the best tech? Is it, whoever's involved with B&I? Probably.
Yes. Let me start by saying that's an absolute yes. I love this question. I've thought about it quite a bit, frankly. I say in this order: culture, trust, tech, budgets. And for this reason, I always like to get the bottom line up front. Culture, because if you cannot scale a company if you don't have culture. I think about my past at Neighborly, and in the 9 years of being the COO, taking it from $425 million to $4.3 billion. What I'm most proud of is that we grew the culture. You cannot represent the brand without the culture. And what's happening, in the world of digital and AI, people are wondering what's real and what's true and what's not. And so if at B&I, our go-to market is really quite fascinating, because our customers who are our members invite future customers to become members, who then create the experience, which is the product that they experience in the meetings, who then some of them roll off and then launch more chapters. And there's a brilliance in that. That doesn't work if you don't have the culture. And our essence of, we have 7 core values, but our top value and our essence of who we are is givers gain. We believe that if you give first, it unlocks opportunity, it unlocks business, and it unlocks relationships. And every single chapter meeting, we talk about it. Every single meeting, we talk about those core values. We could not scale and grow without that culture. So that's the first thing. The next thing is trust, because you can't build culture if you don't have trust. And one of my favorite reads is The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. I highly recommend that. There's 4 pillars to credibility. There's integrity, intention, capability, and results. You've got to, and if I think of somebody I have great trust with, if I think of somebody who's broken trust, at least one of those pillars is missing. And so, as franchisors, we should think about this. We're asking our franchise owners to go out and have this great culture and represent to the customer. We need to make sure we're doing it as well. And integrity isn't just saying what I mean, which is important, and meaning what I say. It's being congruent. So how they experience us, from me to a business coach to our chief marketing officer to our chief product officer, is the same experience on that. And then if you have the right culture that people you can scale with, and you've built strong trust that people can lean into, then start leaning in on the technology. And when I think about things, I don't want to make this whole conversation about AI, but it's been on my brain a lot lately. When I think about, I don't want to use AI to have fewer people in my organization. I want to use AI so the people I have in my organization can do more. Whether it's our franchise owners can do more and create more product and service. And, we want to change it. Our vision is very clear at B&I. We want to change the way the world does business. And if a tool can help us do that, let's do that. We want to use it so that we can give more to the customer, more to our franchise owners, more to one another, so that we can live within our values. And then lastly, it's budgets, because, you know, you have a great culture, social media will win. I think about Norway. I've been watching Norway on the World Cup, and I wanted them to win so bad I couldn't stand it. Everything about that team screamed culture. And they didn't have to spend a bunch of money on marketing because their culture was their marketing.
If I might add to some of Mary's comments, as I think of the franchise process more specifically about how teams are built, and what I mean by that is how our franchisors bring franchisees into the system. In today's world, something that is different than 20 years ago when Mary and Catherine and I were just fresh out of school.
Yes, we were.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest differences is this ability to attract franchisees and how we go about doing it. And often it is done now through portals and brokers and heavy fees. And emerging brands are almost this desperation to find franchisees. All of us get the why. You need cash flow, you need to move the system forward. It's a race for market share. None of those are bad reasons. But in doing so, that initial transaction between the franchisor and the franchisee has the franchisor set up the right expectations of what that business is or is not going to be. And if you ask your franchisees, have I met your expectations in the first year of you being a franchisee? And you get clear no, you should assume that trust has been broken. And what that does is it has a lasting legacy for your brand and how you interact as a team. Because to Mary's point, your team, your organization will only move as fast as the trust allows it. If your organization doesn't have trust, you will constantly be fighting this change activity that whether it's Jimmy, Catherine, Mary, and I speaking about. And so trust is vitally important. But think about that very first transaction and how are you building trust? Because the giver's gain is that the giver gives first. And in this case, I will tell you, it needs to be the franchisor. Mm-hmm. If you're sitting back waiting for your franchisees to, quote, give, it's not going to happen. So you have to lean in. I would suggest lean in first at time of expectation, build trust, and then constantly lean some more. And I agree with everything Mary said. The only thing I might add is execution, execution, execute. And I'll just go back to having a clear signal of what it is you want to accomplish, whether that's a quarter, whether that's a year, or whether that's your long-term vision. And in doing so, make sure you're executing against that. And that might be different for every brand that's on this call, but you've got to be about executing and fulfilling that level of trust that's been given to you.
So David, we have the strategic pillars at BNI. It's the 4 things that we focus on so that we don't try to boil the ocean and do everything at once. And it's a one-pager. And every good building, first time I ever went to Italy, has a cornerstone. It has 4 cornerstones. That creates the strength in the building. And when you were talking about executing, it reminded me about this. And our one-pager, whether it's a member, a franchise owner, an associate in our team, we talk about these 4 cornerstones. And the first one is members first, customers first, members first. That's the cornerstone of everything we do. Members first, customers first, looking at it from our member or our franchise owner point of view. The second one is attracting top talent, because and on every level, and attracting top talent at the franchise owner level and being honest with them. What you said, you don't want to tell them this is going to be the easiest thing you ever did. You want to tell them this might be something tough. And if you want to do something meaningful and tough that makes a difference in the world, come be part of what we're doing. The next one is simplifying processes, that third cornerstone. We have to, as a franchisor, it's incumbent upon us to simplify processes, to make it simpler and easier for them to not, and we tend to overcomplicate. We start off simple, but we don't end up simple. And then lastly, it's what you said, and it all ends with this: execute brilliantly. Those are our four cornerstones. And everything we do, we ask ourselves, are we executing brilliantly? Have we simplified this? Do we have the right talent in place? And have we put our customer at the table with us on how we're doing that? And I absolutely believe if you can't execute, I'd rather execute a 60% plan at 100% than a 100% plan at 60%.
Fully agree with that. And if I had a learning from many failures, right? Because wisdom ultimately comes from experience, and experience just means that we did some shit we wish we hadn't done. And so I share this with the group that I think early on in my career as running emerging brands, I tried to boil the ocean. And you have to remember you have a disparate set of franchisees, and therefore this signal noise, whether we call it signal noise, simplify, you can come up with different terms. But we're going to be clearly focused on the few, the critical few, and we're going to do that really well. Now, our critical few might change next year, but we're going to have a critical few that we are just going to nail. And we know, and the reason we're going to nail those is because I'm going to go back to my curves. It moves the whole group from less profitable to more profitable, right? And so that's where this execution tied in with strategy is so critically important.
I want to add something to that if you don't mind, Mary, David, is you were saying that they're talking about expectations, and I was at a franchise summit out in Utah 2 weeks ago, and I was sitting there doing a mastermind kind of like group with a couple of franchise systems. And I was talking to this operations director, and she said, we're having this problems with our newer cohorts. They don't perform like the old ones. I said, okay, why? Why is this thing? What's going on? And what we finally kind of dug down into is like, what's different about these Z's and those Z's? And really what she came to in that conversation was the people who signed up, the first 10, 20, 30, they were very entrepreneurial because they were signing up for a brand new thing. And the next 30 or 40, less so. They were trying to sign up for a scalable, repeatable process that had predictability and that they were going to make an investment for a specific return. And they were still in the brand building phase of their organization where they needed sales-minded people who have to go out there and generate their own business, but they weren't selling that to the new people. So the people who were signing up for I post the ads, I get the leads, the business closes itself, versus I go out there and I make it happen. And both models are fine, but putting the person into the plan needs to make sure that those two things match up. And that's why they were struggling. There's nothing different about their business other than they put two different types of people inside of it. And so when you're selling these franchise systems, you're selling these franchisees on the stream, setting that expectation. When we hire people at my company, I put up this Ernest Shackleton quote. If anybody's ever seen this, it's like, hey, sign up to go on this boat ride and it's going to be miserable and you might die. And I tell them, this is not what you signed up for. You signed up to join a startup software company, and it's going to be hard and it's going to change all the time, and you're not going to have a ton of day-to-day direction on what to do. It's just going to say, go solve a problem. We don't even know what it is yet. And if you like that, you'll really like it here. And if you need somebody to tell you exactly what to do every day, you'll sit around and wait forever. And the same thing with these two different cohorts of seats. If you need somebody who's going to execute the exact step-by-step process of the plan that you've already given them, and you don't have one, it's going to be a bad time.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left and some pretty fun slides, so we're going to move quickly. And so, Jimmy, I do want you to go through this because I think it's some pretty impressive data. And basically what we've talked about here is, okay, great. We're allowed to change the model. Our two moms and dads on here said it's okay if we change everything and nothing at the same time, as long as we're focusing on franchisee profitability. But what can I do tomorrow for the franchisees that need to make money tomorrow? And we all know that customer acquisition is getting more expensive. So how do you compete? And can we even afford to do this without the model? So Jimmy, take it away.
For sure. So if something changed, you can go forward here a minute. If something changed in the last 5 or 6 years, what is it? So if leads got more expensive, if Google cost per lead has gone up 127% since 2021, this is just like public data, what does that do to our business as a franchise model? Like, where our underlying lead generation method has changed dramatically. We used to modeled this 10 or 20x ROI on every dollar we spent, and now we're getting 4 to 6 on a good day. I hear people say 3 or 4. Sometimes it's pretty tough. So where did all of that go? We still need those leads. We still need those customers. We still need that revenue. What filled that gap? Here's what I see. What filled that gap is the Z. The Z got sliced up into 20 different extra pieces, and they had to fill all those gaps. So they're going to more B&I groups. Mary, I'm sure your membership has grown exponentially with this problem, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, good. Okay, that's
Because
that's
for
an
every
output.
dollar they spend on dues, they get $71 in closed business at B&I.
Hell yeah, that's awesome, right? So they go to that. And then they're like, okay, now the other lead source is getting worse. So then they're like, gotta add something else, gotta add something else. What happens is their time starts to get divided up because they can't be in 3 places at once. And so I'll speak for like a brand new Z and your emerging brand. And this is like a lived experience that I've seen and I've talked to a bunch of people about. If the Z doesn't value their time, it's free, it makes the model look really good. That's essentially the problem here. We have filled the gap with free labor. As a franchisee, I go and I generate the gap of revenue, and it makes the model work again. And I can't be in 2 B&I groups at one time, Mary, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to, right? I just cannot.
Right.
And so I can only be in one place. And so eventually I don't divide in half again. And I can't keep doing that labor. And so what you end up with is a model that doesn't actually scale. We get a captive Z because they can't scale their business into profitability. You said something, David, earlier, really stuck with me. I wrote it down here. We don't want this crazy distribution. We want predictability. And if sales grow, EBITDA should grow because each incremental dollar should be more profitable. But what if each incremental dollar is less profitable because the 50th lead I generate costs me more money than the first because I have to start hiring people, because you can't hire lead generation people to do your job for free. They won't work for free. Even if you will as a Z, which I have, my wife has, worked for 2 years for free. So here's the trap. Here's what I see potentially happening if the model doesn't math, is if the lead gen is predicated on the Z running something like 50% of the leads generated, and I'm speaking about home service businesses, that's what we do, but it depends on what you're doing. So I'll just use my example. If you have to generate half the leads and you don't value your time and you don't cost yourself out, then it looks profitable until you go have to generate twice as many because you can't do 2 jobs. You're already spending 50% of your time generating leads. What are you going to do? Spend 150% of your time? You have kids, like there's stuff to do here. Got to sleep. So the owner generates the leads, then the business does grow. And you have to go hire more staff to generate those leads. But then the profitability of those is worse. The pipeline shrinks because you actually can't afford it. And growth is going to stall. You're going to hit a ceiling. You're going to hit a wall. You're going to run right smack dab into it. That free input in your math equation doesn't scale. And you go ahead, Maddie, here. And so here's like an actual example with nice big round numbers. But if you are looking at hiding that labor, it's not free for the growth of the business. It's just hidden in your time. And I said earlier, this would be one thing I really, really recommend you do. Like one takeaway that I would say, go do this right now is give your franchises, especially your brand new Zs who are launching, an adjusted P&L. Put your labor in the P&L. Maybe you don't pay yourself. You're a brand new business. You're launching. You have you have investment capital. You're going to live off of that. That's fine. But don't not put yourself on the P&L. Because if you are generating half of the business yourself, you're walking into other businesses too, whatever the thing is, you could never pay somebody $0 American dollars to do that work. Which means that when it has to be done by somebody else, you're going to have to pay them. You can then add that back in below the line and see what the profitability of the business is at the end of the day or in the early days. But these are 2 very different businesses right here. But they're the same business in reality. Which is, I'm looking at a business that has the ability to say, ooh, every additional territory I open, every additional route or truck is going to yield me another $120,000. But it's not. Because there's $40,000 hidden in that P&L that you just didn't put in your bank account.
Jimmy, if I might
Yeah, please.
add to that, I think for the franchisees on the call, I would suggest you have to value your labor and you have to value your capital. They are 2 different things. And too often people for lack of a better term, are buying a job. And I think that's what Jimmy's really speaking to. Are you buying a job or are you buying a business? Now, to the franchisors on the call, when we go back to saying franchisee profitability is critical and a measurement point for you, I agree with Jimmy. It should be fully burdened. Even if you knew you were going into the business and you were going to work it and it was going to have owner labor, because the franchisees truly do look at it as, what's my return on capital? What's my return on labor? And I just wanted to add to that point, Jimmy.
Spot on, because I have spoken with franchise systems and lived as a franchisee where I've heard the words, we deliver this much, you go create that much. And then that's where the conversation ended. Like, how do I create that much? Where do I create that much? Like, there was just kind of like an open-ended statement that was infinitely fillable with any idea I could come up with or somebody else could come up with. But then that cost didn't go into the model. And so it was just a fugazi. It was just invented out of thin air, and it won't be able to be invented infinitely out of thin air. And if the model includes those costs and it yields a 20% profitability and everybody's excited about that 20% profit, great. Sell 1,000 of them. Sell everybody on the planet that franchise. That's a great model if everybody wants to sign up for it. If they don't, then you are misaligned at the very beginning of this whole thing. And so this is the commercial part of what we do. So we are a digital door knocking platform, but what that is how do we take that franchisee's time and give it back to them? How do we create leverage or scale? How do we give them a tool to enable them to generate leads? Instead of spending 15 or 20 hours a week, can they spend 1 or 2 hours a week and get that or better results? And I actually don't personally care if this is the answer to your specific franchise's problem. It could be physical mail, it could be going to more B&I groups, it could be doing anything else. That's totally fine. But putting in the model a way to give that Z a path to, here's the math that works in the outcome for your specific type of sale is great. This is just one way to do that. What we see in home services specifically is going directly to the consumer is the answer to that what do I do question. How do I email and text message all the neighbors around every job? How am I generating leads around every appointment I have? And how do I drive down that investment of my time? Because now I can open up that second territory. We've sold 5 territories. 3 of them are sitting there vacant right now, right? That's a problem we've all heard before. How do I get them to open up those territories? Because as a franchisor, you want those territories open. You can't live forever off the one-time fee. You want them generating revenue. So getting them to see that the first one, the second, and the third, and the fourth are making them incrementally more profit without taking double, triple, quadruple their time. This is one way to do that. And we've seen for our home service customers the ability to drive down that overall cost of revenue back to a manageable model where their time isn't this hidden cost. So that's generally what I'm seeing in the market is there's a big problem. And if we didn't address it, we hit it by cutting that Z in half. And they don't particularly like it.
And I think it's important to note too, it's not either or. So for instance, like one of Catherine's bigger franchisees, Fast Signs franchisees, is near us. We use him for all of our signage and we do plenty of door knocking and we are in our BNIs, but we also very heavily use GlassHouse because you can't just sit there and tell franchisees, well, you're not doing enough local. Well, you're not doing enough yard signs. It has to be a multi-prong approach because as Jimmy said, we've got 3 kids and 5 brands. Like we're split across them. So it has to be meeting your franchisees where they are. So we're short on time and I've got a bunch of CEOs here. So I will wrap with this, that what if marketing isn't getting worse? It's just becoming more expensive to buy growth. I was going to do rapid fire. I'm just going to get them to answer questions in a text and it'll be fun to hear what they have to say. So we're going to skip that for now. And again, your franchise model isn't broken, but the assumptions behind it might be. So the brands that rethink the model will outperform the brands that simply are increasing the budgets. And when you leave today, I want you to ask yourself, which assumption in our business model is costing us the most in franchisee profitability? And challenge yourself and your teams to rethink that. And as Catherine, Mary, Jimmy, and David said, you are allowed to do that. It is okay to do that in a franchise, and you absolutely should. Mary, Catherine, David, and Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us today. We had about 145 people stay on the whole time. Really, really appreciate it. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to turn it off.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.